need to be thanked.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Chairman, you may begin.
Thank you, volunteers. I will begin with, this is the continuation of the public hearing from August 14th. I will begin with a roll call.
Mike Coppell, member.
Bill Spence, member.
Rick Smith, member.
Catherine Brennan, member.
Morgan Dean, member.
John Racine, member.
And we have alternates today.
Nancy and
Rob.
Rob Wilson, alternate,
Alternate.
and
Margaret Turner,
alternate. I'm now calling the continuation of the public hearing to order for the Tyrell Development Company Adventure Zone site plan application. As part of the board's review, I have asked our planning consultant, Liz Emerson, to provide a recommendation regarding parking with respect to this application, since parking has been raised as a significant concern. I will ask Liz for her statement now.
Yep, so given that parking has been such a significant concern throughout the whole process of the application, pursuant to RSA 674-43-44 and the site plan review regulations, the board has the authority to request any technical study necessary to complete the review of the application. I would recommend that the planning board considers requiring a professionally prepared parking demand study prepared by a qualified engineer to evaluate the adequacy of existing and proposed parking relative to this project. The applicant indicated on June 9th that the willingness to provide such a study if requested. If the board chooses to pursue this option, it will need to formally request an additional voluntary extension from the applicant to allow time for the study to be completed and reviewed. The extension would typically continue until the next regularly scheduled planning board meeting following the submission of the finalized study.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for your recommendation. And before making a decision on Liz's recommendation, we need to go and ask the board for their thoughts on this recommendation. That is, whether or not you people think that a study is warranted.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
So I'm sort of a fan of experience. I think there's likely enough. I think I saw this morning a new plan with some additional parking spaces if necessary. I'd rather sort of see whether or not something like that is necessary and go for it if we, in our experience, see that parking demand is higher than what we currently expect. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Are you in favor or?
No, I'm not.
You're not in favor of a parking study.
No, I don't think I'd rather see what happens. Not sure this thing's gonna get as much business as we expect. So rather than do a bunch of things, including adding that additional 48 spaces, before we see what really happens is necessary.
I'm in favor of a parking study. There's been so much discussion about it. I have to rely on Liz's information. She's got a little more experience than I do. So I have to go with Liz's recommendation.
I mean, I think to both points, I don't fully understand it, and part of our site plan regulation review is sufficient clarity for the board to understand. I'm not a parking expert, I need a little more information. I don't want more parking, as in like an additional spaces, because it feels like there may be enough parking, but I don't know. So I need more information, so I would be in favor.
I would be in favor too. Based on, again, their discussion at our last meeting, you know, some people felt we had enough, other people, we just didn't know. So that's why I had brought up the motion at the time, so I would be in
Yeah.
favor of parking, no traffic, just parking.
Okay.
Alright, as some people know, I did a little different math than the 100 that is here. So I made some different assumptions. If we take the 1,200 visitors. And first assumption that we make, which I think is very huge assumption, is that all 1,200 of them will be parking there. There'll be nobody walking. I think that's a major assumption that it would be made. So that's number one, but let's start with the 1,200. The other thing we have to remember is that based upon everything that I've seen in the valley over the course of the years and in other areas, the vast majority of these 1,200 people are not going to be there on Wednesday. They're going to be there on Saturday. So assume that 50% of the people are going to be there on Saturday. And assume there's 3 people per car. These are my assumptions. Based on that, and I shared this with some people, I think. Based on that, and you do the math, that means that the 100 that's in here is not valid. The number is 200. Now, if we now go to the parking that has been shown to us within 1,000 feet, it's slightly more than 200, which says that based upon the assumptions that I have, which is double the assumptions here, there is sufficient parking in that area that has been designated. Now, my issue is that means that all of that parking area would be used for this area and none of it's available for anything else. However, I don't think that's a valid reason to have a parking study. It says that based upon my analysis, we're going to double this analysis. There's plenty of parking that they've designated. All right. And that's the math and everything else that I did to try and see whether or not it makes sense.
Okay, I'm in favor of the study because I don't want to make any more assumptions. Everybody's proclamation about what the parking should be and what is available has not been established, verified. A professional study, in my view, would clarify this matter and put it to rest. So I'm in favor of, and that has been a controversy from the beginning. From the moment that this plan hit the table, we really don't know. We don't know what the calculations are that generate parking information. So I want it done professionally, at least that's my view. And my view is the board would be derelict if it didn't do that. So I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 yes and 2 no's.
Mr. Chairman, since the public hearing is still open, are we gonna get an opportunity to comment before you make a decision? on it?
Yes, certainly you will. The public hearing is open, but I wanted to deal with this.
And I have comments specific.
Yes, you do. You have comments and you will be granted them, but what I'm determining here is that there are more board members in favor of doing this study than not.
So do you want to open it to public comment strictly on the parking study?
Yes, that's the subject that's on the floor. Counselor, you want to say something?
Sure, you want to say something, thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Philip Hastings, I'm an attorney. Cleveland Waters and Bass, I represent the applicant on this project. We thought about the studies. I think you've seen our proposed condition. It contemplates actual parking counts based on the experience with this particular use after it's built. It includes a provision that provides for future parking if it turns out of the existing parking spaces are turning out not to be adequate to the need. And that addresses one of the key problems with doing a study before you make a decision on this proposal, And that's, as I think a couple of members mentioned here, there's a question about the assumptions. Doing a parking study of this nature for this use is not like a traffic study. A traffic study, engineers can consult the ITE professional calculations based on experience as to how much traffic demand there is. This is not a comparable exercise on parking. Because there are so many variables that go into the expectations. So if a study is done, they have to do exactly what this gentleman did, is make some very speculative assumptions about how many people are gonna be there at any given time, how many people are gonna stay, for how long, where they're gonna park, how many people are walking there, how many people are using alternate means of transportation. Those are all speculative. And I know there are professionals who will do this. They're making educated guesses. Our proposal is to avoid the guesses. We're proposing a system and we can expand on that concept. We propose looking at studies on 3 peak days, what we assume peak days. If you want counts beyond that, that's fine. If you think providing 48 future spaces as a buffer is potentially inadequate, there's plenty of room on this site to show 96 spaces or 100 spaces. So the adequacy of parking is not really the issue here. This project can provide adequate parking. The question is providing 48 spaces or 50 spaces or 96 paid parking spaces best for the town of Waterville Valley. Because we can take the data after being open on a couple of years, we can take that data, calculate what the demand is, not using speculative assumptions, but using actual real counts, come back to the selectmen or the board, and show that, no, we need 24 spaces to adequately meet the demand. And it's only on these days, so we can do a shuttle system instead of clearing land and further harming the environment. We can come up with an approach that's flexible, as the zoning ordinance allows, to have a parking arrangement that works for everybody. There's no need to delay this decision any longer. If there's a basis for this board to feel that the parking that's being proposed is inadequate, tell us how much more parking you want us to set aside, and the Sununu's will consider it. We're not likely to grant a further extension based on the parking unless this board can come up with a reason. And pushing it forward to a study, which is going to be done when? How long is it going to take to do a study?
I don't know the answers to this, and I don't know the answers to many of these questions.
And I think that's the problem. They don't know how much parking this use is going to generate.
And we've provided, I think you can safely say it's not going to be 200 more spaces.
We don't know.
Yeah.
The clients have provided an estimate. We don't know where that estimate came from.
We just don't have the confidence in the numbers that
You
this,
don't need
this has.
confidence in the numbers that's provided. You need confidence in a process that can determine if what's there now is not adequate.
Okay,
And that's what we're asking for is a process to make that determination that has some common sense to it.
fine. We don't know what's adequate. We're continuing, and Counselor, you're next.
My name's David LaFever, appearing on behalf of the board, David LaFever appearing on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, and so obviously the selectmen support the planning board requiring traffic study. I have just a few comments that I want to add, because in my view, I don't really view it as a discretionary decision. I think that your regulations require it. But before I get to that, I took a look at the town's master plan before I came here last night. And there's a provision in there about parking. And this is what it says. I'll give you a copy, but this is what it says. And I understand this is the master plan. It's not site plan regulation. It's not a zoning ordinance regulation, but this is part of your master plan. It talks about the shared and on-street parking, past practices, and incremental development of the village core resulting in inefficient parking in the village core. So your master plan articulates the fact that the existing parking situation is inefficient. It then goes on to say that this piecemeal, unattractive result is not in keeping with the otherwise attractively planned and landscaped character of the community. The town will need to work collaboratively with landowners and easement holders to support the improvement of this situation. So I bring that to the board's attention to simply highlight the fact that your own master plan calls out the existing problematic situation with the parking in this very area. I have a couple copies. I do want to give you just one. And then if the board members want to take a look at that, they can just look at that. So when I said I don't think you have discretion, this is what I mean. And in the spirit of just citing chapter and verse here, your site plan regulations, it's section 9, have standards. And one of the standards is conformance with your zoning ordinance. And it specifically says that all site plans have to be reviewed for conformity with the zoning ordinance, and specifically calls out provisions for parking, access, and loading requirements. So that is part and parcel of your site plan regulations. This is an obligation that this board has, which is to make sure that every project comes in, complies with zoning. And then if you turn, so in a sense incorporates by reference to zoning ordinance. And if you turn to the zoning ordinance, which is Article 5, it talks about off-street parking and loading requirements. And you have guidelines in your zoning ordinance, but the guidelines that you have do not speak to this type of development. And what your zoning ordinance says is when the planning board is engaging in site plan review, upon receipt, I'm quoting now, upon receipt of a parking study deemed by the board to adequately document the prepared project or the projected need, the board can approve parking. And it can be, as determined by the board. So the board has discretion to approve what is necessary, but your decision-making process has to be based upon a parking study with adequate documentation. And it also speaks to a parking plan, and that parking plan also has to contemplate things like commercial vehicles, oversized vehicles, tour buses, trailers, and loading and unloading. And just from my view of things, and I haven't seen the documentation, I haven't seen the study. Maybe it exists. My sense is it doesn't, but when I say I don't think the board has discretion, what I'm saying is I think it would be an error for the board to approve this project without the benefit of the documentation and the parking study. So obviously the selectmen support that requirement and request that you do require that as a condition of approval. Strike that, not as a condition of approval, but as a pre-condition prior to approval. I have a question.
No, Michael, I'm sorry. Not, you're Michael, you're James.
I have a question. My question is, how long is the parking study expected to take? Because I would want to know how long an extension is being requested. And secondly, if the parking study is done and it finds that parking is overburdened only on, for example, on weekends when there are hockey tournaments, then who is going to be required to provide that additional parking? Because the town has an agreement to via the hockey academy via the town has an easement to use the 73 spaces in the east side lot. If we find that hockey tournaments are overburdening the parking lot, who's going to be required to provide the additional parking?
If I may, what I would expect to see in the ordinary course is the parking study and the documentation would be provided by the applicant in the first instance. That is typically the way it always happens. And then the applicant essentially provides the record in support of what it's saying, as opposed to kind of what you're hearing, which is all very anecdotal, right? It's not supported by a study or documentation. When the board receives that, you would review it. And then at that point, you might decide that you need to get third-party peer review. The board might have to retain its own expert to look at it. That is the typical process. And so it would, to answer the question, how long is it going to take? It'll take them as long as it takes them. So if they need some time, they can get it. And then at that point, you can review it. And at that point, you can decide whether or not you need third-party review or not.
I think the plan was we were actually gonna cut out the middleman, and if it was okay with everyone, we were just gonna retain the expert. And just have an independent expert do it for the town. Liz has talked with some engineers. She talked to someone in Boston, said it would take about 8 weeks. That was the quickest it could get done. I think this is probably just a numbers crunching exercise. I'm not sure how much on-site work has to be done. In terms of who would build extra parking to the extent that it's required only when there's hockey tournaments, the ordinance does talk about situations for temporary parking areas for unusual events that occur no more than 12 times a year or twice a month, and talks about allowing that on grass and gravel and things like that. So if the situation comes down to it's a hockey tournament thing, there are provisions in the ordinance that allow the board to address that.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick question, how
Tina.
much would this cost us?
It's not gonna cost you
Nothing.
anything, the applicant will pay for it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ennis.
Were there additional documentation submitted to the board related to the parking in the last week or so?
No.
And what-
There was a plan.
We
There's
submitted a
plan.
revised
And
plan
is that-
showing the 48 spaces.
And where is that plan available to the public to have seen?
I saw it last evening. So
We didn't get it till last night.
I didn't see it on the website.
He didn't get.
it's not there on the website, not there.
All right, so when will that be available for public to review?
5 seconds.
Mike, you were waiting patiently. Now, let's let Liz answer the question. Liz, you're gonna post it?
I can send it over to Steve. So that
Steve
he's
and
free
Steve
share.
can post it. That's the correct procedure, yeah.
Thank you.
Mike,
I have a procedural question for all the attorneys that are out there. Can we, the board, approve this and indicate that as a condition subsequent, a parking study will be done, and whatever would be necessary based on that parking study, they will do? I'm asking a legal,
Let me take it
I don't care which one of all the professionals out there answer that question. I think it's an important question.
I think that would be a bad idea.
Okay,
As part of approving a site plan application, you need to find that your zoning ordinance is met. So if you think as a board,
I'm
Yeah.
asking.
I know, if you think as a board that your zoning provisions regarding parking are met, you should approve it. And you can do that with a condition that requires a monitoring study. But if you don't
Okay.
know if your zoning provisions are met based on the information you have, you need to require a study before you approve it.
I think I understand what you said,
Okay.
and it, okay.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Good, we have, so
Have
there
actually
is
an agreement with my lawyer.
Is the
Okay.
third
All
one
right.
free?
I think there is a third way, which is to approve the plan. And as Laura suggested, either a monitoring study, but there's a way to do it, they would do a non-monitoring study. Which would have to be before it's built, so you either do it after the use is in operation or a study before. there is a third way,
Which is,
which is to approve the plan except for the parking and require the applicant to come back to the board to address the parking after everything else has been.
not what I would want.
No, I don't think
No.
that's a good idea.
Can
I think it's time to, go ahead.
I just say one more thing? I've brought up the hockey tournaments a few times, and I'm thinking about what James was just saying, and you know, so hockey tournaments may be held in a rink that's owned by the town and run by a separate organization. But if we think about this holistically, these are the people who are using the town square facilities. I'm thinking hockey players are gonna really love to use this. The stuff that's being proposed here. They're staying in the town square condos and the other hotels and everything all over the valley. I can't really think of the hockey tournaments as a town-related activity. You might want to, but I don't think it's fair to say, nor is it good for us to say that we want to look at this holistically and go, everybody that's gonna be here on any given weekend, very busy weekend, there's gonna be hockey players and their families run around doing things, but they're using all the other amenities that we have here, of which a lot of them are owned and operated by the applicant. I'm not sure we point at the town rink as that's the source for all that. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. I can answer.
I understand. Rich is next.
Thank you. My name is Rich Rita and I'm the chairman of the select board. I'd like to remind the board that the ice arena, it's not a hockey arena, it's an ice arena, is used for other events in the summer and the bumper seasons, as we call it, as a dry floor venue. And it's not just during hockey tournaments that we have a lot of people in town and using the ice arena, whether it's as a convention center or a dance event venue that happens. So I would just ask the board not to look at this simply in terms of a hockey venue and then use that to say that there may not be enough parking. There are other things that go on there. That's my bottom line. Thank you.
Katie, you had your hand up.
Katie Smith, Boulder Path Road. A couple of things on the holistic approach, which I like, right? When we look at the conventions, the Warriors, the other groups that are coming in, the applicant, those groups are much bigger than 73 shared spaces would allow. The applicant already is holistically allowing parking in all the other lots as well. Those groups, some of them do stay in town and some of them don't. For the hockey specifically, from the lodging perspective, each lodge has a very limited amount of hockey teams that we allow in the lodges because there's a lot of damage that comes from the hockey teams themselves. So some of these tournaments, depending on the size of the tournament, maybe we'll only have 3 or 4 teams staying in the valley. Yes, some at Town Square, some at Village, some at Valley, and some at Golden Eagle, wherever. Some of the tournaments though, they rent out of the valley, they rent at the Fairfield Inn, or they rent at the one on exit 27. The whole team stay there, and then all 50 cars come into the valley. So not all of those teams stay in the valley and are here the whole time. So it's just a point of note for everybody that doesn't run hotels, that you guys don't know that. So just extra knowledge to understand that not everybody stays here and not everybody is using the parking in other lots as well.
Counselor?
I just wanted to point out, we agree completely with this holistic approach. This is a holistic problem. It's not just the Sununu's problem, and that's what the decision here is seemed to be putting the entire burden on the Sununu's to solve. And that's simply not fair.
You've already been up here, Katie.
Katie Smith, Path Road. My concern as a citizen, not as the applicant side of life here or the operator side of life. My concern as the citizen at this moment in time is if we do this study, the study may come back and say they want a parking garage, and are we ready for a parking garage? We're not there yet. We want a parking garage in 5 years when we get to the gondola, and we know that's part of the master plan, wherever you said the master plan was.
Yeah.
The Adventure Center is on the master plan, but that would be the next step, and if the parking study comes back and says that it wants a parking garage, the applicant will be happy to do that. So just know that that could be the outcome of it. Are we okay with that planning board today?
I don't want you to speak on behalf of the applicant. Applicant.
I just want to reiterate one more time what Mr. Hastings indicated. We have provided a proposed condition that addresses parking, that we will do actual traffic counts. We have shown 48 additional parking spaces. As he said, we could make that 72 or 96. There's plenty of room to add parking spaces on that lot. As you know, we don't think it's necessary, but if it's found through actual counts over time, as we see peak events happening, we can very easily add those spaces. So if we do, as was indicated, a parking study is going to be speculative. It's not going to be based on actual counts. So we are proposing something that addresses what would actually be happening. And we think that's a very, very well thought out condition to be a lever that can be pulled to address any actual impacts. We can pay for a parking study that's going to be just as speculative as what we're doing. We can come up with, I bet we could get 3 parking study companies to come up with 3 different answers. But what we're proposing is to address the actual reality as it unfolds with a very clear, here's where we will add additional parking if it's found to be necessary.
My goodness, Margaret.
Margaret Turner, 17 River Road. I just want to say that if the applicant has strong convictions that the parking is adequate, then I have strong convictions that an expert parking study will confirm that.
Mr. Ennis.
Paul Ennis, 51 Stone Mountain Road. As a resident and talking about the parking, I think there's a couple things. Number one, if the study is done, it shows it needs more parking, and I just had literally a quick glimpse at the new plan. That affects the stormwater runoff, the amount of pavement, and everything else, whether you do the 48 spaces, you do the 50 something or the 75. And I think before that would require more review by the public, because adding that many spaces is a big change to the original plan. Well, my recommendation is if you do the study, it shows more spaces, you do more creative solutions for the parking than just basically repaving or adding more paving in this area. I think it'll look terrible. It would be a blight to the area, and it doesn't make sense just to pave it. And if you do pave it, you have to go through and do all the other things that were previously done in terms of the study, stormwater, as I mentioned before, additional planting and things of that nature related to the parking. So that's a big change. And I would expect or would hope that the board would allow the public to review that and have public review and comment. Thank you.
Hello, James.
Those spaces don't have to be paved. They could be gravel, they could be reinforced turf, which would mitigate the need for any sort of stormwater, or because it'll be permeable surface. Those don't have to be pavement that's going to require a lot of stormwater infrastructure. So there's plenty of options there to mitigate the impact of having those additional spaces should they be found to be required.
I just want to say gravel has a different runoff capacity than lawn. You roll your eyes, but it is true. So I would say if you okay, so if you did things in the nature of use parking that you had at the mountain or the shuttle or things like that, to me, that would make more sense than basically disrupting existing lawn sector.
I think we've reached the point where I now call for a motion from the board regarding the aforementioned parking study. I'm asking for a motion, I could do it. Nod from approval, okay. I move that we require the applicant to submit a professionally executed parking demand study prepared by a qualified traffic or transportation engineer to evaluate the adequacy of existing and proposed parking facilities based on projected demand. The board finds that this study is necessary to make a fully informed decision with respect to this application.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Mike?
I have a question. Katie made a statement, my friend Katie, that one of the things that could be done, and it would be even more unhappiness in the valley, and that term was the garage, which currently is 5, 6, whatever it is, years ahead, should that wind up being necessary. I think a garage is something we must avoid as much as possible. We already know how much people object to it.
That doesn't pertain to this.
It does, because if a parking study comes back and says, well, based not only upon the zone we're talking about, but in parking in general, when people come in and want to use all this lot, and the problem is not necessarily their parking, but parking for everyone.
But that's not what the parking study.
I understand. The parking study is gonna come back and say, yeah, there's plenty of parking that they already own,
Yes.
and they already own that. And based upon a high use weekend, no one else is gonna have a place to park. Where else are they gonna park?
But that's a town issue.
And that's a town issue. And I think that's something that if they come back and do that, and the town now is being forced to do something about it, that can be a not great thing for the town to have to incur the cost of. And that's something I'm afraid of.
But that is not.
No,
something-
I understand. I'm just making,
Okay.
I understand all of this. I spent a great deal of time I spent a great deal of time over there counting parking spaces on both sides of the opposite side of the village. I understand what's there. I understand what they own. All right, and they own a lot of spaces.
Okay.
Which they can take away from everyone else.
Morgan?
I think to sort of summarize it, we have 3 counselors. They've all said similar yet different things. We are laymen in this. We are volunteers. We are appointed by the select board. It is our duty to make sure that everything is done appropriately. We have 3 different speculations about what is adequate. Is it adequate? Is it not? We don't know. We need the parking study to determine that. If they say it's adequate, great, we don't need those extra 48 spaces. If it says it's not adequate, great, we'll do the 48 spaces. We just need somebody who is unbiased and has no stake in this to tell us what is accurate. And, you know, there have been comments about all the assumptions that everyone is making, and that's the problem. We don't know what the correct assumptions to make are. These professionals do know. So that's why I am fully in support of this, because as you have said, we would be derelict in our duty if we did not do this, because it is clearly an issue. We all have opinions about it. We just need someone to tell us what is right.
Any further discussion? I'll call for a vote. John?
Yes.
Morgan?
Yes.
Yes.
Nay.
Yes.
Nay.
The motion passes. Okay, we have another. Creates another problem. Well, the board has decided to follow our planning consultant's recommendations and will require a parking study to be completed. And the results submitted to the board prior to the beginning of its deliberations. So this decision requires the board must request that the applicant approve an extension. In order to do that, we need another motion about extension.
Well, I think Eve on your own can ask for the extension and do you need to consult?
I think the motion required the applicant to submit it, Laura, but you said before you wanted to cut out the middleman. So what's the town plan or?
So the plan would be that the board will hire a consultant. We'll do the thing where we come up with 3 names, you guys pick one, you pay for it, but it'll be an independent expert, so that there's not, you get an expert, you get an expert, we get an expert, that seems silly. Let's get an independent expert to just do the analysis.
So do you think that process can be completed in 30 days?
So
Liz?
I have reached out to Stantec in Auburn, New Hampshire, Desmond in Boston, Mass, and Ty and Bond out of Portsmouth. The one who's gotten back to me so far is Desmond, and they said that they could have it done possibly within 8 weeks. The others I haven't heard back from yet, so I don't know what their timeline is. But I can give you the contact information if you wanna chat with them.
Do you need a recess?
No, but we will agree to the extension because the writing was on the wall here. Is it the consensus, and this is unfair of me to ask, but if the consensus is that the parking issue is the only outstanding issue that needs to be resolved before the board can move in? I mean, this parking issue could have been raised when we started this proceedings, and the 8 weeks has already gone by.
It was raised in June, and frankly, your client offered to do a parking study then, and the plans
But it
have,
wasn't requested.
I understand that, but the plans have evolved over the time. The first time the 1,000-foot radius was shown on the plan was August 5th. This has been a complicated application with a lot of moving parts.
Fair enough. If we're going to agree to an 8-week extension, we'll certainly try to get it done before then. I think it's imperative on us to do that. I would just like a sense that we're not gonna be.
At the end of 8 weeks,
The
there's not another
goalpost is
issue.
not
Yes.
gonna be moved, with something else.
That's fair. Are there other issues that the board has concerns with?
Do we want to discuss the conditions at this other,
The
you know?
conditions are,
Is this put together
I mean,
or
you've
no?
seen the conditions of approval, you've seen the
And we-
proposed conditions of approval, you've commented on them.
Haven't seen comments.
Yeah, we haven't seen the.
we,
I
yeah,
I
I
mean,
haven't seen comments. Okay,
So,
but I'll read them to say, or we will propose that these conditions be accepted.
Well, I wouldn't propose that they be accepted. I would say that having seen the conditions of approval and having seen the comments on the conditions of approval, I don't think there are any other monumental issues to overcome. I think that everything else has pretty much been worked out. The only other issue I think that's sort of out there is the landscaping buffer and how to
Yes.
preserve that. You didn't like the condition about replacing the trees in the buffer. I think that's a valid condition of approval. I think that's when the board's going to be insistent on. So if you want to have a further discussion about that, we could do that.
Now, I don't want to let go of this right a minute. The extension is to be continued. And what the board would like to see is to the next scheduled planning board meeting following the date of the submission.
Yes,
Well, that hasn't been approved.
I know, we'll get to it.
We'll get to it. Okay, but that's
They're agreeing to an extension until after the parking study is done, so.
fine.
I think-
That detail, I think, is relevant.
Well, there are some other conditions. I just respectfully disagree with you on whether that's a reasonable condition to require the applicant to replace existing mature trees that die with like kind trees. That's almost an impossible condition to satisfy. There were some other suggested conditions in there. Studying the water quality of Corcoran Pond seemed to be an overreach and not based on any rash evidence before this board that this applicant would cause a degradation in the water quality.
Did that come from the Conservation Commission? There was a Conservation Commission
We're here.
review.
We still disagree with it.
They didn't propose. Liz came up with the conditions of approval. She could explain from once again, we could go through the proposed conditions of approval.
Yes, I'm prepared to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, but what,
If I may.
Hey, hang on. You're agreeing to an extension.
yes, and I want to know, is that a yes or a no?
Again, whether, what issues also need to be considered.
They are not agreeing to an extension until they understand what other outstanding issues there may be, which would require going through the conditions of approval, I think.
Wait a minute.
Hey, but-
May I please?
Okay, timeout. Counselor,
So, if.
yeah, stand up, please.
Everybody else gets to talk from the gallery. and I
Yeah,
have-
that-
So, if the representation is the expert's gonna take 8 weeks, right?
But we don't know.
And we don't know, but you're thinking ahead, okay, it's gonna take about 8 weeks. When that's available, you're gonna make that available to the public. And
Yes.
the public's gonna need some time to look at it and digest it. That's
Yes,
gonna take a period of time. I
which
would
is the
say,
reason that,
which I would say is about 2 weeks. So you're gonna have to have, and then you're gonna have to have a further public hearing at a minimum on the parking issue.
Yes.
And the parking may require changes to the plan, right? So I would say if you're gonna be looking at timing, all I want to talk about is timing is, it's not an 8-week extension. It's gonna be what? It's gonna be like a 12-week extension because you have to buffer in the time you need after you actually have the documents to figure out, to let the public comment and then decide what you want to do and whether or not there's any additional changes. And then what I would suggest is if you've got 12 weeks, there's plenty of time between now and then to discuss all of the other things. As far as the conditions are, they were circulated, a draft was circulated. As far as the town's, easements, because that's kind of the selectmen's, one of their concerns. I think we sort of generally all agree that, yeah, that needs to be accounted for on the approval, but what we have not agreed upon is sort of wordsmithing the language of the condition. And so I can give you what the selectmen proposed, and you can get what the applicant proposes, and you can eventually make a decision. But I would just suggest for you, if you're going to, if they're gonna grant an extension, make it long enough to do everything that we're gonna need to do, which is not just get the report in 8 weeks, but to follow up on that. So-
Well, it doesn't have to be the only extension. There can obviously be a further extension. I agree with you that once we get the report, there's going to have to be a further public hearing, obviously, where that is discussed. And there may need to be adjustments to the plan. And there may need to be a further extension beyond that.
right, but
I
democracy,
cannot promise you this is the only outstanding issue. I cannot promise you you're gonna get everything you want in the conditions of approval. I can promise you, you're not getting any parking in the western parking lot because we don't have any authority to give it to you.
But the applicant have made that representation at the last hearing, and if that representation stands, then it should be part of the approval. That was my point.
Okay,
So,
I don't remember
You
that.
misunderstood.
well, I believe the representation was if they want to park on the west side, they can. And if that's not the representation, that's fine. If that is the representation, then it needs to be documented and memorialized. And that was my point.
I think our representation is that we would engage in the dialogue with the selectmen to resolve the problems that are caused by their use of the hot years.
Yeah.
okay. Now, Mr. Ennis has been patiently waiting on whatever it is that you have to say. Please, brief.
Tom Ennis, 51 Stones Mountain Road. We had a site visit a week ago, and before you close or other issues, because I thought there were some issues related to the planting and the screening that need to be discussed so the proponent can respond to those things. So I'm hoping that you'll give us the opportunity to speak to that before you close anything.
I'm trying to resolve this parking business. Yes, I understand you're right, that they, then Public hearing is not closed.
Okay.
Just
So I
please,
did have some comments related to the planting.
I will ask you to sit down now and I will ask Tim to.
I won't answer from the gallery, just to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Smith, 97 Boulder Path, and as we talk about the delays that could happen here because of this parking study. As a business operator in this town and with many of the business operators in this town, we are struggling. We have the lowest occupancy we've seen, third lowest in 20 years. We have depressed business right now. This is going to stimulate businesses, and as an operator and a businessman in this community, I would urge the board to work quickly on this, please.
Understood. Catherine?
So, well, just to move things along, we want to just do a site plan, public addresses, and then I do think since everybody's here, I don't know if we can just quickly kind of go through the conditions, not saying that they have to be finalized, but if there's some that potentially can be crossed off, or if there's further questions, just so that people can work on them if they need to, if there's certain, just.
Right, but I'm not satisfied yet. Counselor, do we have an extension or do we not have an extension?
Or do we have to wait till we go through these?
Need a minute.
Recess.
Let's have a 10-minute recess. So you need privacy and
Yeah,
all
we'll
of,
step up.
everybody outside? Okay.